Christ the King Sunday is a day in which we recognize that here in this world there may indeed be rulers and leaders and presidents and you name it, who are overseeing various different forms of government across the world, and in this country, governments and president and Congress and so forth, they have some rule and law and justice over our lives, but Christ the King Sunday is about recognizing there is a higher king above it all, and his name is Jesus. And it's a very different kind of king, is it not? The king who's crowned on a cross and not given a throne. The king who suffers on behalf of others instead of elevating and exhorting himself above everyone else. But that is the king who shows us the way in which the kingdom of heaven is meant to operate through love and care and empathy for all people. And that is the higher power. That is the higher Lord that we celebrate then on this day. And we recognize that in that act of self-giving for all the world, that's where we find the King of all creation truly leading his people, leading us and encouraging us, strengthening us by the sacrifice that he makes, that we would then be saved from all the sinful stuff we get caught up in, to see a way forward and a reason to do it, a reason to lead. Because that sacrifice that we make of ourselves for the sake of others honors a king who is greater than all kings. So with that being said, then I want to do a little Bible study on Psalm 46. So if you want to open your bulletins, I know you tucked them away, you got all comfortable thinking, I'm going to sit back and relax for a minute, chill out while the pastor drums on for a moment, maybe nod off, who knows. So take a look at Psalm 46. I want to do a little Bible study with us on this day, because Psalm 46 always comes up every year on the Sunday of the Reformation, when we celebrate the Reformation. And it's always then that we read Psalm 46 in worship in light of the Reformation. And it kind of gets a certain connotation in our minds and hearts for years and years of this. And so I'm going to pull it out of that context for a minute and take a look at Psalm 46. First of all, take a look at verse 1. Verse 7 and verse 11. Those God is our refuge and strength lines. Right? It's very clear. That's the refrain of the song, of the lyrics. That is the message. God is our refuge and strength. But notice the change from the second part of verse 1. A very present help in trouble, to the next two times that same refrain line comes, it changes. The refrain changes from a very present help in trouble to God of Jacob is our stronghold. We go from a very present help in a time of trouble to now having a stronghold. Stronghold is a fortress, right? Where you are now guarded behind and within the walls of the fortress. Okay? And so we go from outside the fortress to inside the fortress through the course of the song. We start out outside in the midst of a world in trouble. And we're brought in to the fortress through the course of that by verse 7. So let's look at what's happening outside the fortress now as we're a part of that, right? We get to therefore we will not fear, because God is our refuge and strength. But look at what's happening. The earth is being moved. Mountains are shaking to the depths of the sea. Waters rage and foam. Mountains tremble. River whose stream... forget verse 4. I got ahead of myself. But in those three verses, look at that. Right? Look at the description of the immensity of the trouble. Realize that the context here is the psalmist is writing at a time in which Jerusalem, Israel, is being attacked by Assyria, invading forces, overtaking the nation. The temple is being torn down. Literally, to them, the earth is shaking. The rivers are raging. The seas are coming up. Everything about earth and creation is coming apart. And while these words are kind of spiritual in their dimension, the experience in that moment in time for these Israelite people was very much feeling like that. So outside the fortress of God, that we get to, outside the fortress, all of the world is in chaos. Now, when chaos strikes me, I turn to prayer really quickly. But you know what I also do? I'm tempted to do all the time. It's a sinful thing, but I can't help it. As soon as chaos strikes me, when the rivers are raging against me, when the mountains are crumbling against me, and the world is in upheaval with me, and when my life is sort of turned upside down, as these words would describe, I start to spiral. I start to do that thing where this event is happening, and then I start saying, what if it goes to this far? What if it goes this far? What if that happens? And then what if this happens now after that? And I start to spiral. And my despair that I felt over here now is a lot worse. I'm spiraling down into darkness by my own mind, assuming different things are going to happen, and I get really worried. Can any of you relate to this? I see a lot of things on. Yeah. We're all on the same page here, right? Some of you have come to me and met with me in my office, and I can hear the spiraling as you describe what's going on. I can track it and trace it. We all do it, don't we? Think about what's happening in that spiraling, right? Who's in charge of that spiraling? We are. We're trying to control things. We're trying to get a grip on things. And we're spiraling because we can't. Right? This is the point. All right? In which verse 4 enters in and pulls us in. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. There's an invitation here, right? Pulling us in. It's the holy habitation of the Most High God. Higher than anything you're dealing with right here, right? God is in the midst of that city. And that city shall not be shaken. Notice that. Everything else is shaking. Everything else is coming apart. We're spiraling. And the psalm says, but come here. This is not going to move. That's the stronghold. We're now brought in to the wall that will not move. God shall help at the break of day. That phrase, break of day, I just want us to, for a moment, pull that line out. It only occurs in a couple of times in the Old Testament. The other time is Exodus 14, verse 27. When the Israelites left in the Exodus story, when they left Egypt after the torment of Pharaoh, and they're on the brink of disaster a second time because the army has reformed and they're attacking and they're approaching and they're worried and they're spiraling. What do we do, Moses? And Moses reaches out to God and God says, strike the water with your staff. And he strikes the water and the sea parts. And they go through that chaos, right? That's not a comforting scene. That scene of the water coming up is not a scene in which you're terrified, but you're going forward, right? Because these walls of water might cave down any minute, but you're told to go forward. So you go, you get to the other side, and now the water comes through and ends your worry. There is nobody attacking you now. It's done, and God has done it. And the next thing that happens, in verse 27 of Exodus 14, it says these words, at the break of day. This same sort of phrase in the Hebrew language is pointing us to that moment when just as God brought us out of Egypt, and right at the brink of that moment when all the chaos ended finally, and you were free, and you had peace and quiet on the other side, here is that moment. Stop spiraling. I got this. Okay? Verse 6. The nations rage. Now we're outside. Now we're inside the stronghold looking out. the nations are raging, the kingdoms shake. Notice the kingdoms shake, but we're still reminded that God's kingdom doesn't shake. The kingdoms shake, and God speaks. So now picture this, right? You're inside the fortress. God and his fortress are your stronghold. You're holding fast to the promise of God, and that God is taking care of. You're spiraling, and you're able now to get a grip in a moment of prayer. In a moment, you're able to get a grip on things, right? And God speaks in that moment. What happens when God speaks in the Bible? What happens when God speaks? Anybody want to put your hand up and answer my question? Feel free. I don't know. God speaks to us all the time. We're often not listening. But I'm glad you're listening, Sandy. Maybe you can help me sometimes. When God speaks, stuff happens. Feel free to insert up some other word than stuff. Because when God speaks, things are getting done. Okay? Because the world and everything, right, is brought into focus now with God. And so what does God speak? While we're there and the kingdoms are shaking, the nations are rattling, there's an invasion happening. While all of this is happening and God speaks into it, God is speaking into it. Picture yourself, right? You're there you're there in the fortress. God is on the stronghold. Picture God sort of standing on the wall, right? And we're protected inside the wall. We've been brought in by the Psalm. We've got a moment of peace. And in the midst of that moment of peace, the chaos is still raging. And you're worried that it might break down this barrier you just created in a moment of prayer. God stands on that barrier and looks out. And what does God speak? Look at verse 10. Be still. Be still. Right? I know it's a beautiful song we just sang. There's another, and traditionally we love to hear that be still as a kind of lay your head on a pillow and take comfort and rest, kind of be still. But the Hebrew isn't really like that. The ancient language is much more like the strong arm of a loving parent saying, be still. I am God. I got this. That's what's really happening here. You are inside the fortress at this moment. God is on the fortress, looking out at a world that refuses to be still. And he says, be still. No, I am God. And looking back at all of us, I got this. Trust me. Right? That's the image this psalm is portraying. Right? So in times when Psalm 46 is that comforting rest and peace, let it be what it is. But know that in the ancient language, that be still is a strong sentiment from God commanding the chaos, commanding it to stop on behalf of all of those that are inside the fortress that he has brought in. We, my friends, have been brought into his kingdom through what Christ has done for us by our faith in the gift of our baptisms. So then what comes after that? God says, I will be exalted here. I'm in charge here. I know you have a king and you have government officials and all of this is going on. And I know, it's chaos. Come. And I'm going to command the rest of the world to be still and know that I am God. They are not. And I've heard them. My friends, I find great comfort in that way of looking at this psalm, in this world that we're living in right now. To know that here among this family of faith, among these people, we have the glimpse of a kingdom in which God stands on the edge of that wall of that kingdom. We are held safe in that. By the gift given to us by Christ in our baptisms, we are held safe and secure for all eternity. We are held in his grasp, and nothing will take us out of that grasp. And so brought in through the words of the psalm, brought into that, so that our spiraling stops, right? And we're brought into the comfort of what God and His stronghold can do. And to know that while we're in the arms of God, it's God who stands on the edge, on the boundary, on the barrier with Christ Himself on the cross and commands the chaos to stop. On our behalf, God does that. On our behalf, Christ crucified makes it stop. An innocent man crucified on a cross makes it stop. My friends, that is the gift of our faith, right? There are times when be still on the pillow cushion that we can lay our head down and be at rest is a nice thing. But I think we're living in a time now where we need the strong arm of God standing on the edge of the fortress, commanding the world to stop it. Be still. I am God. And this is no way to behave with my people. This is no way for the world to be ordered. Be still. No, I am God. That's what I hear in Psalm 46. And then we can put our faith in, we can put our trust in Him. We can stand behind that, right? As we look about the world. And as we sort of struggle for a response to this world around us, right? We can do so from within the confines of that God who has like a father or mother sort of taking us behind Him and stands in front of us and commands those outside us, be still. I got this. This is not going to happen anymore. That's what's in Psalm 46. And friends, may that be a blessing to you. May it give you peace. May you realize that what we've been given is the gift of being taken into the kingdom forever and ever. And we still have a God today who's on the edge of that kingdom, defending His church, defending His beloved mission and message, defending you and I in our righteous endeavors in this world, so that we are free to continue to defend the people in this world, to advocate for those who need an advocacy, to defend the righteousness of God in this world. Know that God stands with us on that edge, commanding the chaos. Be still. Know that I'm God. Amen.